We are long overdue for a reckoning of the kinds of female characters that dominated the most popular media in the 2010s. And I mentioned this briefly in the video that I made about the Black Widow gap, but I feel like audiences are only just now in the past couple of years kind of coming around to these conversations and this discourse with a level of nuance that we honestly weren't really allowed to have before this. And I say that because as someone who felt very protective of any character that represented any kind of diversity during this era of filmmaking, it was hard to have a nuanced conversation that allowed for any critique that didn't give ground to the unwarranted criticism of the rampant normalized bigotry, racism, and misogyny that had been normalized in these fandoms, in these spaces for so long. I think the reason why we got this kind of character to begin with was an overcorrection from the normalized misogyny and frankly erasure of female characters of the 2000s. And the kind of cool girlification of a character that had never really existed before in this kind of media resulted in something that was flawed but necessary. And I think that that's why a lot of women in particular felt very protective of them. And I think that going into this new era of filmmaking where we have characters like Yelena and, Kate Bishop and a whole bunch of other like Miss Marvel and wonderful characters, I think that people are going to start looking at a lot of these characters differently. And in some cases, I think that that's actually going to be a good thing. I think that characters like Rey Skywalker and Captain Marvel deserve an apology. I think that these two characters are some of the exceptions to the rule, some of the characters that actually do exhibit a level of depth that we don't ordinarily get to see, and they had flaws, which is wonderful. I think that characters like Black Widow are unfortunately going to be looked back upon, and all people are going to see is the very shaky, hollow foundation that this character was built on, that they tried to build up later. Again, with all due respect to like Scarlett Johansson and the creative team that tried retroactively to make this character as well written as possible, kind of after the fact. But I've been wanting to make a video like this for a while because I know that this is a complicated thing to talk about. I know that in these spaces, women especially have been made to feel unwelcome, and not just these characters on screen, but our presence in these conversations in general has been dismissed. Our opinions have been belittled. And a lot of times we have this desire to protect these characters, these avatars that whether or not you feel like they are as well written as they could be, are really all we had to represent ourselves. And this video is really dedicated to this one commenter that on my Black Widow video was really aggressively accusing me of being part of the problem of why female characters were underwritten, specifically because of my scathing review of Madam Web. This commenter's accusation was that if I call female-led superhero movies the worst superhero movie of all time, then I am contributing to that erasure. And I just want to say, for the record, I don't think I called Madam Web the worst superhero movie of all time. I think I called it one of the worst movies of all time, period. We don't need to limit it to just superhero movies. This movie is offensive on every level to me as someone who enjoys art and as a woman. I think it is absolutely fine, and we should normalize when a movie is not only creatively bankrupt on every level, but on top of that, they attempt to sell it to a specific demographic that doesn't have the same level of representation as other demographics on the basis of supporting this movie is an act of feminism. That's offensive to my intelligence, and that's offensive to my spirit. So I rebuke your criticism, and I double down on my criticism of Madam Web. And I think that conversations like that are actually super important. I think that it's been a tendency for a long time to say that media that represents a marginalized group has to be protected, even if it's bad, because this group deserves bad media too. And I would say, yes, we deserve all kinds of media, but when corporations try to do the bare minimum and sell it to you for a profit and claim that that is empowering to you, that's not something we should accept. And that's one of the reasons why I think the representation of women in this era specifically is going to people are going to have a very complicated relationship with a lot of female characters that were very popular during this time period. And I do think that a lot of the characters that got the most scrutiny are retrospectively going to be looked back upon as characters that should have gotten their due a lot earlier.